Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into the foundation of the carbohydrate metabolism, that is glycolysis, also known as Embden-Meyerhof pathway. In this video, we are focusing exclusively on the 10 enzymatic steps that transform a single molecule of glucose into two molecules of pyruvate. We will break down the preparatory phase, splitting phase, and the payoff phase where the cell finally harvests the ATP and NADH. Whether you are a medical student preparing for exams or just curious about how your cells generate the energy, this step-by-step breakdown is for you. Note that we will be covering the regulation, energetics, and the clinical correlations like the Cori cycle in separate upcoming videos. So make sure to stay tuned for more. So this is the first step in the glycolysis pathway where the glucose is converted to glucose 6-phosphate in the presence of the enzyme hexokinase. One ATP molecule is utilized to convert glucose to glucose 6-phosphate and ATP gets converted to ADP. Now coming to this transformation, phosphorylation. The purpose of this phosphorylation is glucose is easily traveling in and out of the cell. To trap the glucose inside the cell, it has to be converted to glucose 6-phosphate. That is the purpose of this phosphorylation, the first step. We already just now we have listened that it is catalyzed by the enzyme hexokinase. There is another enzyme called as glucokinase. Hexokinase is not induced by insulin, whereas glucokinase is induced by insulin. That is first difference. Then hexokinase is inhibited by feedback inhibition of glucose 6-phosphate. That means if glucose 6-phosphate levels are more, it inhibits the hexokinase enzyme. Phosphorylation doesn't happen and glucose will stay as glucose. Suppose if the glucokinase enzyme is acting on the glucose and converting it into glucose 6-phosphate, no matter how much amount of glucose 6-phosphate is present, it will not inhibit the glucokinase enzyme. And then finally, this is the first rate limiting step in the pathway. So the glucose 6-phosphate formed in the first step after phosphorylation undergoes isomerization. So the second step is isomerization and the enzyme involved is phosphohexose isomerase. So isomerization, isomerase, phosphohexose. Hexose molecule is glucose, phosphate molecule is present. So phosphohexose isomerase. It is converting one form of the hexose molecule to the another form. Glucose 6-phosphate is getting converted to fructose 6-phosphate. This is the third step in the pathway, that is once again a phosphorylation step where fructose 6-phosphate is converted to fructose 1,6-bisphosphate in the presence of the enzyme phosphofructokinase or phosphofructokinase 1 with the help of ATP molecule. This is the second ATP that is being utilized in this cycle. Then this is the second rate limiting step. That means it is an irreversible step. And the inhibitor of phosphofructokinase 1 enzyme is citrate. So in these cycles, you have to remember which steps are the rate limiting steps, which enzymes are the rate limiting enzymes, and which substances act as the inhibitors of those enzymes. And one more thing you have to remember is the fructose 6-phosphate has many fates. But if it is converted to fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, it is bound to undergo glycolysis. Hence, this third step is also called as the committed step of the glycolysis. Now, coming to the fourth step, here is a splitting step. The 6-carbon molecule fructose 1,6-bisphosphate is broken down between the third and the fourth carbon to form two 3-carbon compounds, which are glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate, also in short form it's called as DHAP. So 6-carbon compound is broken down to 3-carbon compounds, two 3-carbon compounds with the help of the enzyme aldolase. So continuing on that step, the DHAP can be isomerized to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate with the help of the enzyme phosphotriose isomerase. Phosphotriose isomerase converts the DHAP to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So far one molecule of glucose is giving rise to two molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So next, coming to the fifth step of the glycolysis, a little complicated step, so I want you to pay attention. This involves two reactions. First is the phosphorylation carried out by inorganic phosphate. So far, the phosphorylation in step 1 and step 3 happened. The phosphate we obtained was from ATP molecules. Here, no ATP is involved. There is directly inorganic phosphate is being added to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to form 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate in the presence of the enzyme glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase. So, phosphorylation and dehydrogenase. Here the enzyme glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase is carrying out the dehydrogenation step, oxidative dehydrogenation of the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Or overall, you can say the fifth step of glycolysis is oxidative phosphorylation. Here, ATP is not used for phosphorylating the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate molecule. Instead, direct inorganic phosphates are being added to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and the product that is obtained is 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, and the NAD plus is reduced to NADH plus H plus. What is the importance of formation of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate? Let's see what happens if it is not formed. So in this step, the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase is directly inhibited by an inhibitor called as iodoacetate. The iodoacetate directly binds to the active site of the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme and thereby inhibits the enzyme. So that's why the enzyme is not working, so oxidative phosphorylation doesn't happen, so 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is not formed, the glycolysis cycle will get inhibited. Suppose if the other inhibitor arsenate is acting upon the reaction, what happens here? Here what happens is that instead, at the place of phosphate, the arsenate binds and it forms 3-phosphoglycerate instead of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Arsenate combines to form arseno 3-phosphoglycerate and then to 3-phosphoglycerate. Here you have to remember the difference between 3-phosphoglycerate and 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. 3-phosphoglycerate is anyhow formed from 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, but without the formation of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, if the 3-phosphoglycerate is formed, the next step will not happen. So the next step is even more important. What happens if 3-phosphoglycerate is formed without the formation of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate? Let's see what happens next. So now let's see why 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is needed before 3-phosphoglycerate is formed. So here, as you can see, the first substrate level phosphorylation is happening. In the previous step, one NADH plus H plus is formed. That NADH plus H plus will undergo electron transport chain, will reach the electron transport inner mitochondrial membrane where the electron transport chain is present, and the electrons are transferred, and finally ATP is synthesized. That is the oxidative phosphorylation. Whereas here the ATP is synthesized without the help of electron transport chain. Hence it is happening at the ATP formation is happening at the substrate level itself. There is no involvement of mitochondria, no ETC. Hence it is substrate level phosphorylation. For this substrate level phosphorylation, what it needs is a ADP molecule and a phosphate molecule donor. 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is the only molecule here that can donate one inorganic phosphate to ADP to form ATP, whereas the 3-phosphoglycerate cannot donate the inorganic phosphate. Hence, arsenate inhibition, even though can produce 3-phosphoglycerate, with the ATP is not produced. Because 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is not produced, substrate level phosphorylation will not be happening, so ATP is not produced. The entire purpose of glycolysis is for the production of ATP. If ATP is not produced, then there is no purpose of glycolysis happening. So that's why 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate has to be formed before, and it can give its inorganic phosphate to the ADP to form the ATP and 3-phosphoglycerate. And the enzyme involved here is phosphoglycerate kinase or bisphosphoglycerate kinase. The seventh step involves isomerization of 3-phosphoglycerate to 2-phosphoglycerate with the help of the enzyme phosphoglyceromutase. The phosphoglyceromutase enzyme, it will shift the phosphate group from the third carbon to the second carbon. Third carbon to the second carbon, the phosphate group is shifted by the glyceromutase, phosphoglyceromutase. Phosphoglycer is the compound name, mutase. Phosphoglyceromutase shifts the phosphate group from the third carbon atom to the second carbon atom. So the eighth step is dehydration step. Dehydration means loss of water, right? So what is happening to the 2-phosphoglycerate? The 2-phosphoglycerate is acted upon by the enzyme enolase. It loses a water molecule to form phosphoenol pyruvate. The phosphoenol pyruvate is a high energy phosphate bond containing compound. For the action of the enolase, magnesium ions are required. This is in normal. So 2-phosphoglycerate acted by the enolase, which is requiring magnesium, undergoes dehydration, removal of water molecule to form a high energy compound called as phosphoenol pyruvate. Just like other enzymes are having an inhibitor, here fluoride ions inhibit the enolase. We have already seen in the practicals or any other experiments where in fluoride addition in the gray colored vacuolators helps as an anti-glycolytic agent. Why is that? Because the fluoride will irreversibly bind to the magnesium ions, remove them, make them unavailable. So enolase will not be activated and inactivated enzyme will not be able to perform a reaction. So 2-phosphoglycerate is not being converted to phosphoenol pyruvate. So the clinical application coming to this step is that in gray color vacuotainer, fluoride is added. Only in the gray colored vacuotainer, the glucose samples are needed to be collected to estimate the amount of glucose present in the blood sample. Because the gray vacuotainer contains fluoride, the fluoride will inhibit the magnesium, enolase is not activated, phosphoenol pyruvate is not formed. So that is the clinical application. So the final step is that the phosphoenol pyruvate that is formed from 2-phosphoglycerate is converted to pyruvate. Phosphoenol pyruvate in the presence of the enzyme pyruvate kinase will transfer one phosphate molecule from phosphoenol pyruvate to ADP to form ATP. So here ATP is formed without the involvement of electron transport chain. So that's why it is a substrate level phosphorylation. So the second substrate level phosphorylation is happening at the step where the phosphoenol pyruvate is converted to pyruvate. First, the pyruvate kinase will convert it into a enol form of the pyruvate, then spontaneously it gets isomerized to keto form of the pyruvate. And this step is an irreversible step. So some textbooks mention this as the step 10, where the fate of the pyruvate is decided. And some textbooks just doesn't involve it as the step 10. So let's assume it as a step 10 and consider the fate of the pyruvate metabolism also as one of the steps. So what happens is it is dependent on the presence or absence of oxygen. In the absence of oxygen, which is the anaerobic conditions, the pyruvate is acted upon by lactate dehydrogenase to form the lactate, which then enters the Cori cycle. Whereas in the presence of oxygen, the pyruvate is acted upon by pyruvate dehydrogenase to get converted into acetyl-CoA and carbon dioxide. That acetyl-CoA will enter the TCA cycle for complete oxidation. So what is the importance of the pyruvate getting converted into lactate? In some cells like RBCs, where there is no mitochondria, there is no oxidative phosphorylation. That means no ETC is forming. So how do they survive? They need ATP for survival. The only way they can survive is by substrate level phosphorylation. But for substrate level phosphorylation, they need NAD+. NAD+ is needed for the fifth step. Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is converted to 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Because 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is a high energy compound, it can donate its inorganic phosphate to the ADP to form ATP. That is the first substrate level phosphorylation, if you remember, right? So for this first substrate level phosphorylation to happen, it needs NAD+. And where is this NAD+ generated is that, suppose if the oxygen is not present, pyruvate is converted to lactate in the presence of lactate dehydrogenase by oxidizing the NADH to NAD+. If you see the previous slide, you can see the NADH is getting converted to NAD+. So this NAD+ is again reutilized in the fifth step, that is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate formation. where the NAD plus is converted to NADH. Again, this NADH will reach the last step where the pyruvate is using this NADH in the presence of lactate dehydrogenase forms a lactate and NAD plus. Like this, even though the oxidative phosphorylation is not happening in the RBCs because of lack of mitochondria, solely depending on the NAD plus regenerating this way, they get the energy through substrate level phosphorylation reactions. So that is the importance of conversion of pyruvate to lactate. That is mainly useful for the cells where they lack mitochondria. So what is the significance of the glycolysis pathway? The glycolysis is the first major pathway to break the glucose and get the energy. And it is also the universal pathway present in almost all the body cells except RBCs, cornea, and lens. So these three structures, they solely depend on glycolysis to meet their energy demands. Then glycolysis, since it is happening in anaerobic conditions also, it is a major source of energy to the muscles. Then, since it is the first step in the oxidation of the glucose, uh, the complete oxidation of glucose is said to occur when it completes the Krebs cycle, the TCA cycle. So before this, the pyruvate gets converted into acetyl-CoA and carbon dioxide. We have already discussed that in the presence of the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. So the starting products of Krebs cycle are obtained from the glycolysis. And finally, it's a precursor for the biosynthesis of many things. Few glycolysis intermediates, the intermediates and the metabolites formed in the glycolysis are utilized for the synthesis of proteins and fats, thereby forming a connecting link between the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And there you have it, the complete 10-step journey of a glucose molecule as it's broken down into two molecules of pyruvate. From the initial energy investment in the preparatory phase to the final energy payoff through the substrate level phosphorylation, we have seen how the cell strategically rearranges and splits the carbon chains to keep the metabolic engine running. While we have mastered the how of these steps today, there is much more to the story. In my next videos, we will be discussing about the energetics, the regulation, the clinical correlations. So finally, if you have any questions about specific enzymes or intermediates we have discussed today, drop them in the comment section. Thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.